Teal dear, we're back with MGTOWunited, who doesn't have a clue about what he's talking about as usual. At this point in time, I am like 99% certain that this person is a troll, because I don't understand how anyone could lack this much brain function and still somehow be able to breathe. But let's go on anyway, shall we?
Angry MGTOW here.
Still butthurt about life, eh? At least you've got some emotional background music to go with your emo whining this time.
And today we're talking about tiddled.
Tiddle. I'm not sure if you entirely know what that word means, especially since it has multiple definitions, but this is the one that makes me smile the most. So if you want to go ahead and tiddle some deer, I'm totally okay with that.
Tiddled doesn't understand feminism. Tiddled has constantly pointed out that feminism is about equality.
Did you fucking what, mate? Yeah, sure, on a channel where I constantly point out the double standards, sexism, misogyny, and misandry of feminism. A channel on which I have openly stated that feminism is a female supremacist movement masquerading as equality. But yeah, sure, I totally think it's all about equality. Whatever's gonna make your straw man grow up nice and big and strong.
However, he frequently fails to acknowledge that the practicality behind what feminism says it is and what feminism actually does exist.
You mean apart from all of those times that I do exactly that? You know, like how, for example, in my Steve Shives video, I mentioned the differences in the right to genital integrity between men and women, and how feminists are constantly banging on about how female genital mutilation is absolutely terrible, but don't ever breathe a single word about the prevalence of circumcision, when both of these things are a child having part of their genitals cut off without their consent. But sure, I don't acknowledge the differences between what feminism says it is and what it actually does. I mean, despite the fact that that's what I actually spend most of my time doing. But hey, you know, these are your assertions, so whatever.
He constantly attacks even people who are critical on what the men's rights movement is, defining it under his own vague understanding.
Yeah, sure, my vague understanding of what the men's rights movement is about, which includes, but is not limited to, the double standard of the right to genital integrity, the legal sentencing gap between men and women, the double standard between men and women's legal right and ability to opt out of parenthood, both pre- and post-birth, the constant demonization of men via the concept of rape culture, the constant belittling of the agency of women via victim-blaming culture, the fact that it is socially acceptable to demonize, mock, and belittle men, especially in the media, constant feminist denial of men's need for emotional support and safe spaces, lack of justice and acknowledgement of male victims of female rape, the fact that there are countries and jurisdictions that deny that a male can even be raped by a woman, the fact that on the issue of domestic violence, homosexual male partnerships have the lowest rate of domestic violence, whereas homosexual female partnerships have the highest rate of domestic violence. These are all issues that are frequently addressed by the men's rights movement, and all issues that I coincidentally have also addressed. But I totally don't understand what the men's rights movement is about. That's a mighty fine-looking straw man you're building up there.
And then grabbing research from one place or another place to say that what he's saying is justified. Here's the thing about research. The vast majority of all research conducted today is completely incorrect.
Nope. Are there biased and inaccurate studies and sources out there? Absolutely. I know this because I spend rather a large amount of my time debunking those. For example, in the video that I recently put out about male privilege, specifically Part 1, we look at a paper published by the CDC, a paper which claims that 2% of men are the victims of rape and 15% of women are the victims of rape, which seemed somewhat suspicious to me. We then look at the methodology used, and when you look at the definition of what they define as rape, you can see why their numbers are questionable. They intentionally ignore the concept of made to penetrate or forceful envelopment, in other words, a woman forcing a man's penis into her vagina, mouth, or anus against his consent, be it turgid or flaccid, which of course reduced the number of male victims of rape substantially, and then they added on cases of sexual assault, specifically referencing attempted but incomplete penetration, and then counting that as rape, which artificially inflated the female number. So I am very well aware of the fact that there are studies done with poor method or conclusion bias. This is why when I reference studies, I frequently look at the method in the video as well, so that we can be sure that intentional manipulation is kept to a minimum. which is why, in the past, even when I have found a study which supports my position, if the method is incomplete or the sample size is lacking or further research is needed, I will make a statement to that effect within the video, which I did in my video, The Sound of Crumbling Narratives. At the end of that video, I reference a study which shows that sexist portrayals of women in video games does not necessarily lead to sexist thoughts of gamers. However, I state that there are several caveats to that study, first and foremost being that it was a small sample size conducted only in Germany and therefore doesn't represent the wider population of the world, and that everyone taking part was over the age of 14, which is not therefore conclusive for people under the age of 14. Now, most of the studies that I cite come from as objective a source as I can find, usually related to government sources. Now, sure, governments do lie to people. However, the raw data that they collect does not, which is why President Obama can make ridiculous statements such as women earn 77 cents to every dollar that a man makes, when his own data actually contradicts that fact, because it is highly manipulated data that pits all women against all men, which is why when you then dig down into that study, you will actually find that the wage gap that they actually find is about 5% and is limited to very, very small select fields. And that this 5% gap actually goes both ways through the sexes and varies according to age as well. I do not get my statistics from uncited websites, with ideological biases such as men's rights websites or feminist websites.
I have 2 masters.
And yet you're still a complete moron.
I don't know what Tiddledare's background is, but one of the reasons why I don't link to lots of research, while I do tend to cite my stuff, I don't link to a lot of research because a lot of the time research is incorrect.
Again, the indisputable fact that yes, there is bad research out there. Just because some research is bad, that does not make all research bad. If you do what I do and you focus on as quantitative data as possible, you can arrive at a reasonably objective conclusion, because quantitative data is only concerned with a number of observable instances. It is measurable, it is repeatable, and it does not come with a conclusion attached. If the amount of domestic violence reports are more or less even between men and women, I don't need to read a conclusion to that, I have the evidence for it in front of me. I can, will, and do formulate my own conclusion based on the data. When you perform the same quantitative analysis multiple times, and you see the same pattern over and over and over and over, you can make a reasonable observation based on all of that data. And that is what I do. And this is the reason why I side neither entirely with feminism, nor entirely with men's rights groups, nor entirely with MGTOW, nor entirely with any group. Because all of these groups present both valid and flawed data. I just generally find these days that feminism is responsible for the vast majority of flawed data, whereas the men's rights activist side of things tend to be more accurate with their data. Which is not to say that all feminist data is inaccurate. I have even acknowledged that some of their claims are backed up with credible evidence. Very few of them, but a couple of them have been. And then when it comes to the men's rights or the MGTOW side, I have found that some of their explanations are not backed up by solid evidence, and have relied a little bit too much on the interpretivist method.
Tiddledare continues to parade this false narrative, and he uses his large subscriber number to attack people in the community, regardless if they're feminist, MGTOW, MRA, whomever, to gain more subscribers.
Okay, genius with 2 masters, explain to me how this works. If I point out the stupidity of feminists, who is going to watch those videos? Well, it would probably be anti-feminists, MRAs, and some MGTOW and PUAs. But then, I criticize MRAs, MGTOW, PUAs, and anti-feminists. But who would be interested in watching videos criticizing MGTOW, MRAs, pickup artists, and anti-feminists? Oh, that would be feminists and social justice warriors, who are the people who I spend most of my time pointing out the stupidity of. Do you see the contradiction here? I try to keep my own personal biases and opinions to a minimum. Sure, they'll slip in every so often, but I try to avoid that. I'm not going after any particular ideology here, nor am I defending any particular ideology here. But please, almighty genius of the internet with your 2 master's degrees, tell me who I'm pandering to by pointing out the stupidity of everyone, myself included sometimes.
You see, Tiddledare is a fucking whore.
Well, you had to get something right eventually, didn't you?
A subscriber whore.
We're gonna come back to this point later because it's fucking hilarious.
He doesn't really care about the community, nor does he care about anyone else.
No, I don't care about your community or you. There's a difference.
He cares about watching that subscriber number go up and up and up and up.
I do like to touch myself while watching that bar grow every night. But seriously, who the fuck goes on to being a content creator on YouTube without at least part of them thinking, it would be kind of cool if I got a shitload of subscribers and people liking and watching my stuff? Almost sounds like you're a bit jelly, bruh.
He'll attack anyone without really utilizing critical analysis. Don't get me wrong, he'll sound quite critical and quite analytical, but he's not really being fair. He presents a one-sided perspective, again, backed by hordes of so-called research.
Yeah, that pesky research and evidence always getting in the way.
That you can simply acquire by jumping into a database, scanning for a subject, and then saying, poof, now we have an article that says this relates to this, so I must be right.
Yeah, I mean, why would anyone want to formulate an opinion that's backed up by evidence and research? Especially objective empirical research. That's just crazy talk.
There are many articles that say that feminism is the best way to conduct a psychological session, and feminism should be the driving factor. There are tons of research articles that say that feminism should be embedded in everything from politics to government to pretty much anything and everything else.
Yes, and I look at that research and I reject it, because it is usually subject to a poor methodology and confirmation bias, based on an interpretivist reading of the results, assuming, of course, that the paper even has results, because a lot of these feminist sociology and psychology papers are all interpretivist in nature, which means they have no objective empirical evidence. It is merely how someone perceives what they've observed and what their interpretation is. For someone who claims to possess 2 master's degrees, you really don't seem to be capable of critical thinking at all. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder if you did gender studies.
Again, there's research out there that says that it's theoretically possible to eat a fucking car.
Citation needed. I would fucking love to read that paper.
This is why I say that research is not always practical. And with research, you can pretty much manipulate the variables to get any outcome you want.
And this is where critical thinking ability comes in, and is why I frequently point out flaws in the methodology of papers that are used as citations, because they usually ignore key variables or change definitions of words. This is why I spend so long analyzing these studies, especially studies which rely on a degree of interpretation, such as studies dealing with the classification of rape or the classification of domestic violence.
Which is similar to what tiddled does. You see, he takes one-sided perspective articles that he specifically looks for to justify his one-sided perspective, and then uses that as proof of evidence that he is right.
Yeah, because studies which report on the number of crimes recorded are totally one-sided. Just like studies which count the number of reports of domestic violence are somehow one-sided. I'm honestly at a loss to explain your retardation at this point in time. You just do not know what empiricism is.
And even when someone presents an opinion, he bashes that opinion based on his clear evidence that his factual-based statements that are really just opinions are backed by evidence and research. So now his evidence and research prove that he is right and you are wrong.
Yes, this is the difference between an informed opinion and an opinion from ignorance. Now, rather interestingly, you did a little follow-up podcast-style thing on this topic earlier. And in this, you presented an example of, well, what happens if someone claims the grass is blue? And basically went on to say that, well, it's their opinion, so you can't somehow bring facts into the equation to prove their opinion wrong. Unfortunately, yes, you can. You see, in this example of someone claiming that the grass is blue when in reality it is green, we have several things that we can test. So the quickest way of doing this is to look at a chart of the visual light spectrum. Now, for those who don't know how light and color actually works, basically light exists and it's white. It contains every single color within the spectrum, and when that light comes from a light source and strikes an object, all of the color is absorbed except for whatever color that object appears to be. So in the instance of a plant absorbing light, it's absorbing all of the light with the exception of green light, which is to say light of a certain wavelength. In this instance, that would be a wavelength of about 500 and something nanometers. Now, in this particular example, 492 to 577 nanometers is the objective criteria for what we consider to be green. That is to say that any light traveling at that wave frequency, we will call it green. So that is our objective criteria, and we have something measurable, which is the light waves reflecting off of the object. So what we would do in this instance is we would take our plant, we'd pop it inside a spectrophotometer, shoot some light at it, and then measure the frequency of the light that was reflected off. And rather unsurprisingly, the results would probably come back anywhere between 490 and 570-ish. But the person is adamant that the plant is actually blue and not green, because to them it appears to be the same color as an object that reflects light at between 450 and 490 nanometers. And what we do is we would repeat this with other objects that everyone else considers to be green that we know reflects light between 490 and 570. And this person would still be claiming that they are seeing blue. Now, after performing this multiple times with multiple different objects using multiple different people, i.e. controls, we are able to establish that the person claiming that the plant is blue has an inaccurate assessment of what they are seeing. This is basically how you test and assess color blindness. Now, in this particular instance, I can bring all of this evidence, all of this repeatedly gathered empirical data, and I can say to the individual, your perception of this is inaccurate. They are still entitled to their opinion that the grass is blue, but objective corroborated empirical evidence suggests that they are inaccurate in their statement. And this is the difference between an informed opinion and an ignorant opinion. Opinions can and should absolutely be countered with facts and evidence if they are inaccurate. Otherwise, we might as well just go back to slavery, nigger lynches, and fag drags. The reason that people used to do that before was because of ignorant opinion, that blacks were inferior and gays were evil, or wrong or something. And the reason that we don't do it now is because we have objective, empirical, scientific proof that neither of those opinions are accurate.
And this is why I've said countless times, Tiddled is a fucking whore.
Getting a bit slut-shamey in here, isn't it, you oppressive shitlord?
Let me know what you think about Tiddled in the comments.
I consider him intelligent, witty, and dashingly handsome.
So what you think about my statements and comments?
I think they are laughable, retarded, and you should stop breathing. Effective immediately.
Because someone like this guy doesn't really care about the community. He doesn't really care about anyone else. I've seen other interviews he's done with Stardust, and, you know, this guy basically, he claims to be a MGTOW, although he does not fall under the so-called MGTOW label.
I just don't call myself one, although I do thoroughly reject the concept of marriage, and find the gynocentric nature of society slightly disturbing. By those two criteria alone, I do actually fit the bill for what would be considered a MGTOW. I just don't call myself one because it means I'd be associated with retards like you.
You know, most naturally he shouldn't, because he's a fucking hypocrite. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, there is a section for him, it's called Mainstream MGTOW.
So am I MGTOW or aren't I MGTOW? Apparently you are the sole arbiter of that decision.
But again, this guy doesn't really believe in anything. He's just collecting his YouTube checks.
Whoa, hold up there, young'un. I'm only doing this for the money, am I? If I was doing that, I would have a Patreon link on my page, a PayPal tip jar, and would have enabled the YouTube fan funding. But wait, what's this I spy while sleuthing around your YouTube channel?
Inspector Gadget. Inspector Gadget.
Holy shit, fan funding and a PayPal account, as well as adverts on videos? One of us is being a YouTube whore. Not entirely sure if it's me, though. There is a phrase for someone like you, and you've already mentioned it in this video.
Fucking hypocrite.
Yeah, that phrase. Although all of those money-making links does kind of explain why you shit out anywhere between half a dozen and a dozen videos a day. And you call me some sort of whore only doing this for attention when without fail the first line in the description box of every single one of your videos is, "Please like this video." And yes, we're going to come back to that point again in a little bit because it's fucking hilarious how much of a hypocrite you are.
So, guys, go ahead and comment in the comment section and let me know what you think about the subscriber whore.
Well, someone already did. the Psychological Cynic, who pointed out your stupidity quite aptly. And what was your response? And finally, because you are the whore, MGTOWunited.
Go ahead and like this video, please subscribe, and just remember that all roads lead to MGTOW or death.
Yeah, I have never had to beg people to like my videos or subscribe to my channel, and to date I have not asked for a single penny from the people who do. And yet, somehow, I'm the whore. But I do encourage my subscribers to go and donate some money to MGTOWunited, so that he can get the special help that he needs. Or at the very least, something to make his life that little bit safer. God, will you stop being such a whore already?